What do you do when the man you love tells you to go relax, just so he has time to betray you? Have you ever trusted someone so deeply you stopped listening to your own instincts? Would you know betrayal if it wore the same face that once promised to protect you? Because on one quiet Thursday, Talia came home a day early, and her entire life changed at the kitchen door. Talia Holt didn't chase attention. She didn't need noise to feel seen. She moved through life with a kind of grace that whispered, not shouted. Born in a quiet southern town where people still held doors and said "ma'am" without irony. She grew up watching her parents run a small bookstore filled with pages and silence. She wore soft fabrics. She believed in boundaries. She didn't post photos of her breakfast or argue on the internet. She listened more than she spoke. People called her gentle, but her strength was real. It just didn't perform for applause. When she met Zevrian Holt, he said that's what he loved most about her. And for a while, she believed him. Zevrian wasn't born into wealth. He built his company from the ground up. A tech empire with his name stamped in silver on every floor of the glass tower in Midtown Atlanta. His phone never stopped buzzing. His inbox always had at least 1,000 unread emails. He played the long game, ruthless when needed, calm even when cornered. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. She loved open windows and slow breakfasts. He lived in boardrooms and private jets. Yet somehow they found something real. At first, he said her silence felt like peace in a life that only screamed. She said his ambition inspired her. In the beginning, that was enough. When Zevrian proposed, it wasn't dramatic. No flash mobs, no velvet boxes at rooftop parties. He asked her in the kitchen one night while she sliced peaches for a pie. "Talia," he said, "I want to wake up with you forever." And for a while, forever looked sweet. They lived in a penthouse. She picked the furniture. He told her to make it feel like her. They traveled when he could make time. He'd wrap his arm around her waist at events and say, "This is my wife," with pride in his voice. But as the years passed, things shifted. He stopped holding her hand at public dinners. He began missing meals, then entire weekends. She told herself it was the season they were in. Success came with sacrifice, and she was willing to sacrifice. Or so she thought. At first, the silence between them felt normal. He was tired. Meetings ran late. His company was growing. She made excuses for him, even when no one asked for them. But slowly, the silence thickened. It stopped being restful. It started feeling defensive. He'd come home, offer a kiss on her forehead, and head straight for his office. Sometimes she'd sit at the dinner table alone, the food untouched, waiting for him to come out. He didn't. She never complained, because he never yelled. He never cheated. He never hit her. And to her, that meant they were still okay. But distance doesn't always scream. Sometimes it starves you in silence. She noticed the change in his wardrobe first. Stylists started picking out his clothes. His cologne changed. He began wearing custom suits that didn't wrinkle when he sat. He'd host investor dinners at 5-star restaurants. She used to attend. Then she stopped being invited. When she asked once, he brushed it off. "You wouldn't like it. It's all noise." And she nodded, because she believed that protecting his peace also meant not questioning his choices. What she didn't see then was this. He was designing a life that looked better without her in it. Their bedroom changed too. It used to smell like lavender and candles. Now, it smelled like polished wood and distance. Zevrian bought new sheets, replaced the photos in their hallway with abstract art. He claimed it was minimalist, modern, but Talia knew the difference between evolution and erasure. He wasn't evolving. He was deleting the parts of their life that softened him. And still, she stayed, because she didn't believe in walking away when things got hard. Talia thought loyalty meant staying quiet. Her mother always said, "Don't nag a man, don't beg for time, be his peace." So that's what she did. She gave him peace. But peace doesn't mean silence in the face of neglect. Still, Talia held on. She told herself, he just needs space. He's building an empire. She never asked who he was building it with, until one Thursday the silence cracked and the truth stepped into the light. She used to wake up before him. Back when mornings meant something, she'd press her fingers lightly against his arm, then slide out of bed to start the day. She always made tea. He drank coffee. She'd put both mugs on the balcony ledge and wait for him to join her. He used to smile, say her name like it tasted sweet, call her light in a dark world. That was his favorite phrase. Now, she drank tea alone. He started sleeping in the guest suite under the excuse of late-night calls. "I don't want to wake you." He said it like a kindness, but the nights grew colder and the guest room door stayed closed. She once stood outside it, hand inches from knocking, but she didn't. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like begging. Even her body began to forget what warmth next to him felt like. Her pillow never smelled like him anymore. Sometimes she wondered what changed. What made the man who once clung to her waist in grocery store aisles now avoid eye contact at breakfast? It wasn't another woman. Not yet. It was something else. Something quieter. Zevrian had begun living a second life, and the problem wasn't infidelity. It was replacement. She wasn't angry. Not then. She was confused. Still hopeful. Still trying. She found herself cleaning up after him more, picking up his suits from the floor, reordering supplements he used to care about, keeping the pantry full, paying the housekeeper's tip, doing all the little things that still tied her to the home, even when the love inside it was shrinking. Then came the first real shift. He asked her to stay at a hotel in Buckhead for a few days. "They're renovating the guest suite," he claimed. She nodded, packed a weekend bag, and left. When she returned early, the place was spotless. Too spotless. New bedding. No sign of any work ever done. She didn't ask questions. She told herself she was being paranoid. Then it happened again. This time, he booked a retreat. "You've been stretched thin," he said one Wednesday night. "Take a weekend. Unplug. I'll take care of things here." She blinked. "I didn't ask for time away," she said softly. He kissed her temple. "Exactly why you need it." The next day, he handed her an itinerary. A cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. No signal. Wood-burning stove. A basket of books already waiting. It was perfect. Too perfect. She said thank you. She said she loved him. He didn't say it back. She packed her bag quietly, put the keys in her purse, watered the houseplants. She looked around their bedroom one more time before leaving. Nothing in the room felt like it was hers anymore. The retreat was beautiful. The trees rustled. The air felt light. But her heart didn't. She journaled, took walks, sat on the porch swing. But she couldn't shake the feeling. He hadn't kissed her goodbye. He hadn't even walked her to the elevator. She checked her phone every hour the first night. No texts, no missed calls, not even a check-in. She wrote in her notebook, "Do you miss me, or do you miss who I used to be in your shadow?" The second day she stopped expecting to hear from him. By the third morning, she woke up early, restless. She opened her phone and checked the location app they both forgot they had linked years ago. He never turned his off. He was still at the penthouse. She stared at the screen, then closed it. Something pulled at her. A quiet alarm in her chest. The kind you only hear when you finally stop pretending everything's okay. She didn't think. She just packed. She left before noon. The drive down the mountain was quiet. No music. Just the soft hum of tires against wet pavement. The city rose in the distance. Glass towers, silver signs, the noise she had tried so hard to adjust to. As she pulled into their private underground garage, she noticed something strange. His car was home. It was Friday. He was supposed to be in San Francisco. She rode the elevator up, hands clenched around her purse. The hallway felt longer than usual. Her heels echoed against the floor. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The lights were on. The air smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee. Her heart paused. Then the laughter came. Soft, feminine, too familiar in a place that used to be hers. She stood still. She listened again. There it was, two voices, one hers, one not. She didn't speak. She walked slowly down the hall. The kitchen door was open. She saw the back of the woman first. Bare feet, one of her robes, stirring something on the stove like it was her routine, like she belonged. Then she saw Zevrian. He stepped in, shirtless, holding his phone. His expression relaxed, until his eyes found hers. He froze. "Talia." His voice cracked. "You weren't supposed to be back yet." The words hung in the air like smoke. The woman turned. Talia didn't know her. It didn't matter. She looked at the scene, her robe, her kitchen, her husband, and she said nothing. Not a scream, not a tear. She turned, walked out, closed the door behind her. She didn't break down in the hallway, or the elevator, or the car. She held her breath until the interstate swallowed her. Only when she pulled into her parents' driveway, only then, did the sobs come. She didn't get out of the car. She leaned her head against the steering wheel and shook, because everything she had feared in silence had now spoken out loud, and the echo would not leave her alone. Talia didn't unpack when she got back to her parents' house. She didn't explain much either. Her mother looked at her face, the way her lips pressed into silence, and opened the door without questions. Her father stood in the hallway, nodded once, and stepped aside to let her pass. She walked into her old bedroom, the one with the pale yellow curtains and soft wooden shelves still holding her childhood books. The air smelled like safety, like paper, like home. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her clothes, purse still hanging from her shoulder. Her hands rested in her lap. Her body didn't move, but her mind ran through every moment that had led to this. She heard footsteps outside the door. Her mother's. Then a quiet knock. She didn't answer. The door opened anyway. Her mother walked in with a glass of water and sat beside her without speaking. For several minutes neither of them said anything. Talia finally whispered, "I saw her, in our home, wearing my robe." Her mother didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She only placed her hand gently over her daughter's. "I left," Talia said. "He didn't stop me." That night, she didn't sleep much. Her body lay still, but her mind spun with images. The woman's back, the coffee. On the stove, Zevrian's face when he realized the timing had failed him. He wasn't afraid of being caught. He was annoyed he'd been interrupted. That realization hit harder than the betrayal itself. He didn't panic. He didn't chase her. He only looked. Inconvenienced. She stared at the ceiling until morning. Then she got up and went downstairs. Her mother was already at the table, slicing pears. Her father was on the porch, humming under his breath. She walked to the sink, poured herself tea, and sat quietly. Her mother glanced at her but said nothing. "I don't want to explain it all," Talia said. "But I'm not going back." Her mother nodded. "Okay. I gave everything. I stayed quiet. I tried to make it easy for him." "You don't need to justify anything," her mother said softly. "But I do," Talia replied. To myself. She didn't check her phone that day, but the screen still lit up. Missed call, voicemail, text. She didn't open any of them. It took 3 days before she blocked the number. She wasn't ready to talk. She was still trying to breathe. Her mother helped her fold laundry. Her father offered to fix the door to her old car. Their gestures were quiet, but they anchored her. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't need to. They saw it in the way she avoided mirrors. By the end of the week, she began to move again. She went for walks around the block, picked up groceries with her mom, flipped through old poetry books, and on a Saturday morning, she sat in the living room alone and whispered out loud, "He never really chose me, did he?" She'd asked herself that before, back when she noticed how he never posted pictures of them online, how his work galas always had empty +1s, how his friends sometimes called her by the wrong name. She had ignored those things, called them small. But they weren't small. They were signs. She'd spent so much time trying to be low maintenance that she stopped being seen at all. A week later, She pulled out her journal and began writing. I let him build a life that made sense on paper, and I stopped asking if it made sense in my heart. She didn't cry as she wrote. Her tears had already run dry. What she felt now was a soft emptiness, the kind you feel when a chapter ends before you're ready, but exactly when you need it to. The next morning, she woke up early, walked to the porch, breathed in the scent of her mother's garden. She picked up her phone and searched for apartments. It was time. Her parents offered to let her stay longer, but she knew she needed a fresh space. She wasn't running. She was starting again. By midweek, she had 3 viewings lined up in Atlanta. One of them was a small brownstone on a quiet street, 2 bedrooms, a porch, lots of light. She liked the listing photos. The shelves looked handmade. The kitchen counters weren't cold stone. They were wood, lived in, warm. She toured it the next afternoon. The woman showing it smiled too much, talked too fast. But when she stepped into the living room, Talia knew. She could breathe here. She signed the lease that evening. She returned home with the papers in hand, and her parents sat quietly on the couch while she told them her plan. Her mother exhaled deeply, nodded, and said, "I'm proud of you." Her father looked at her for a long moment and added, "You didn't lose anything." "He did." She packed light. Only what mattered. She left the jewelry he gave her. The purses still tagged. The shoes she never wore. She boxed up the journals, a few dresses, her favorite mugs, and a framed photo of her parents from the 80s. The morning she moved in, she placed the photo on the kitchen counter first. Then she lit a candle and opened all the windows. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't overlook the city skyline, but it felt like hers. It didn't carry echoes of betrayal. She sat on the floor with a cup of tea and stared at the quiet walls. No decorators, no stylists, no imported vases, just her. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. She spent the next few days setting up, little by little, one shelf at a time, one corner of the room until it felt lived in. She ordered a new mattress and slept on the floor until it arrived. She cooked for herself, simple meals, vegetables from the local market, homemade soup, baked bread that didn't rise but made the house smell like hope. She started her new job the following Monday, a wellness center in the heart of the city. It was a place that offered therapy, yoga, grief support, writing workshops, the kind of space she used to donate to under Zevrian's name. Now, she worked there, not as a figurehead, as someone who needed healing too. Her supervisor was a middle-aged woman with silver curls and a soft accent. She didn't ask about Talia's past. She only asked, "What kind of space are you trying to build?" And Talia replied, "One that doesn't make women shrink." She was given a small office with plants in the corner and a window that caught the morning sun. She started helping with scheduling first, then managing events. Eventually, she was asked to host a journaling group for women dealing with emotional transitions. She said yes, not because she had answers, but because she finally knew the right questions. The journaling group met on Wednesdays. 6 women sat in a circle with tea, blank notebooks, and stories they rarely told anyone. Some were recovering from divorce. One had lost her partner to illness. Another had left a job that drained her spirit. Talia sat with them, not above them. She didn't call herself a leader. She didn't preach healing. She simply wrote alongside them. At the end of each session, she walked home. It became a quiet ritual, a slow stroll through her neighborhood, passing front porches and evening lights. The brownstone felt more like hers with every return. She bought a small side table, a lamp, a bowl for her keys, the small things that made a space feel like it belonged to someone present. And in the middle of her second week at the center, she met Callan. She wasn't looking for anyone. She was restocking books on the community shelf by the entrance when a man stepped through the doorway, tracking dirt from his boots onto the tile. He paused when he saw her. "Sorry," he said, brushing a hand across his chest. "Just came from a site. Didn't mean to drag the outside in." She looked up. He wore a dark flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His forearms were tan, marked with lines of dirt and sweat. His voice was low, unhurried. He had kind eyes. Steady. "It's all right," she said. "This place needed a little dust anyway." He chuckled and held up a clipboard. "I'm Callan. The centre hired me to check the landscaping out back. Said something about drainage issues and a tree that's trying to eat the fence." She nodded. "It's a territorial tree." That made him smile. "You must be Talia." She tilted her head. "How'd you know? You're the only one here who looks like they could talk a tree down from bad behavior." She didn't expect to laugh, but she did. A quiet one. "I hope you win," she said. "I usually don't fight plants," he replied. "I listen to them." That was the first moment she noticed something different. He wasn't trying to charm her. He wasn't scanning her. He wasn't calculating what to say next. He was just present. She didn't ask more. He didn't linger. The next day, he came again. This time with gloves and a plan. She passed him on her way out and nodded. He lifted a hand in greeting. "Still talking to the trees?" "Trying," she said. "They're moody." He laughed again. "Aren't we all?" She walked away, smiling to herself. It was small, but it reached somewhere inside her that hadn't felt touched in a long time. Over the next 2 weeks, their encounters continued. Always brief, always soft. One afternoon, she walked into the garden while he was kneeling near a row of bushes. "Did they cooperate?" she asked. He looked up. "They didn't fight me." Progress. He stood and wiped his hands on a cloth. "You live close?" "A few blocks." "Good neighborhood?" "Quiet." "That your preference?" "Now it is." He didn't ask what now meant. He only nodded. "I like quiet too," he said. "Noise is easier, but it doesn't last." She looked at him, the way his eyes held hers without pressure. It didn't feel invasive. It felt calm, and that was when she felt the shift. It wasn't attraction, not right away. It was comfort, familiarity in a stranger's rhythm, a recognition of someone who didn't need her to perform. They didn't exchange numbers. They didn't flirt. But something started, something low and steady. She didn't tell anyone, not her mother, not her group, not herself, out loud. But when she passed him again the following Tuesday, he was trimming a hedge and said, "The camellias are about to bloom. Might want to come see them before they fade." She did. That evening, after her session, she stood beside the hedge while he pointed out which buds would open first. "I always miss this part," she said. "The in-between." "You're here now," he said. "That's enough." That night, she sat on her couch, tea in hand, windows open, and let that sentence replay in her head. "You're here now." That's enough. She had spent so long trying to be what someone needed that she forgot what it meant to simply exist and be received. The next morning, she brought him coffee. No label, no explanation. He looked surprised but grateful. "Thank you," he said. "I was starting to think this place ran on herbal tea only." "They tried," she replied. "I rebelled." She didn't stay long. But later that week, he left a small potted herb outside the door with a sticky note for rebellion. "In case you need backup." She smiled when she saw it, placed it on her kitchen counter, and for the first time since she moved in, the apartment felt a little less like recovery and more like renewal. Still, she wasn't rushing anything. She'd already learned how quickly affection could turn into erasure. So she let things grow slowly. She showed up to her work. She watered her windowsill herbs. She wrote. And once a week she passed Callan. They spoke. They laughed. Then they went their separate ways. Until one Friday afternoon, it rained. A slow, even rain. The kind that soaks the streets but never feels urgent. She stepped outside after work with no umbrella. Callan was standing under the porch overhang, waiting for his truck to be brought from the shop. "You're about to be drenched," he said. "I'm already wet," she replied. "Come wait with me." She hesitated, then stepped under the cover beside him. They stood close, not touching, the scent of rain in the air, the hum of traffic behind them. He looked at her. "I know you're not looking," he said, "but I still notice you." He added, I won't push. I just wanted you to know. She looked up at him. I'm not sure what I'm ready for. He nodded. That's okay. I'll still be here tomorrow. And the day after that, she believed him, because he said it like a promise he intended to keep, whether or not she ever said yes. Have you ever met someone who didn't try to fix you? They just stayed, someone whose silence felt safer than 1,000 words. If this part of the story touched something in you, let us know in the comments. Like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come, and you won't want to miss it. Zevrian Holt had always believed he could manage outcomes. He didn't like surprises. His calendar was color-coded, his team handled chaos before it reached him, and he made decisions with the precision of someone who had built $1 billion company from nothing. Control was his safety. So when Talia left without screaming, without begging, without a single word, it unnerved him more than anything she could have said. At first, he didn't chase her. He figured she needed space, that she'd come back once the sting wore off. He told himself she'd remember everything he provided, the penthouse, the lifestyle, the protection. She'd remember that she never had to ask for anything. What he didn't realize was that she never asked, because she had already stopped hoping he'd listen. By the time a week passed, he started to worry. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Messages were left unread. The house was too quiet. He stood in the bedroom they used to share and stared at the empty side of the closet. He opened the bathroom drawer. Her toothbrush was gone. So were the small jars of face cream. The robe, the real one, not the one borrowed by the woman he should have never let stay, was gone too. That's when it sank in. She hadn't walked away in anger. She'd walked away with finality. He tried to tell himself she needed time, that she'd call eventually. But every day she didn't reach out, the silence became louder. And for the first time in years, Zevrian realized he wasn't in control anymore. Not of her, not of what came next. 2 floors down, in his office, his assistant brought coffee and schedules, but he barely glanced at them. His team noticed his temper was shorter. He cancelled 2 interviews, delayed 3 deals. He caught himself staring at the photo on his desk, the one he'd almost taken down a dozen times. It was Talia, on the day of their 5th anniversary. She was in the sunroom, laughing at something he said. He didn't remember what the joke was. He only remembered the way she looked at him that day, like he was still her home. Now, all he had were meetings and walls. Talia, meanwhile, didn't check the headlines. If Zevrian made statements, if the media guessed why she hadn't been seen in public lately, she didn't care. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. She was learning how to live without explaining her worth. One morning, she woke up and didn't check her phone at all. She brewed tea, sat in the window seat and wrote. I used to measure love by how much I could endure, she scribbled. Now I measure it by how much I can breathe. At the center, her group was growing. A new woman joined, who'd walked out of a 14-year marriage after realizing she'd been lonely the entire time. Talia sat across from her, nodded, and said, You don't need a map to know when you're lost. Sometimes, silence is the clearest signal. The woman cried, and Talia didn't rush her. She let the quiet stretch. That's what healing sounded like now. It wasn't until late one evening that she passed a newsstand and saw a tabloid headline with her name on it. Where is Mrs. Holt? Sources say she's gone quiet. After mysterious break, she didn't flinch. She walked past it like she wasn't even the subject, because the only version of her that mattered now was the one who could face a mirror and see clarity. That same week, Callan knocked on her door. She hadn't expected it. She'd seen him at the center earlier that day, fixing the back gate. He hadn't mentioned coming by. She opened the door slowly. He was holding a small plant. Lavender. Thought your kitchen could use something that calms the air, he said. She took the plant, smiled a little. Thank you. He didn't step inside. He stayed on the porch. You all right? He asked. She nodded. Just sorting out the pieces. If you ever want to talk, I know. He turned to leave, then paused. You don't have to tell me anything, he said. I just don't want you to think I'm walking away because I don't care. She held onto the plant a little tighter. "You're not walking away," she said. "You're showing me how to stand." He gave her a quiet look, the kind that didn't demand answers. Then he walked off into the fading light, and she stood in the doorway for a long time, holding lavender, breathing softer than she had in years. Back in the penthouse, Zevrian stood at the window with a glass of whiskey. The woman he'd brought into their home hadn't stayed. She left after 2 days, sensing she wasn't welcome anymore. Even in a space where she'd once felt bold enough to wear Talia's robe, Zevrian hadn't argued. She was never the point. Talia was. He picked up his phone again. His last text still sat unread. "I'm sorry. You deserved more." He typed another, deleted it, then typed a new one. "Where are you? Let me talk to you. Please." He didn't send it. For the first time in years, he realized he couldn't fix something with power or money. He'd made the mistake of choosing convenience over connection. And now, for the first time in his life, he was left outside a door that only opened for someone who saw her as more than background noise. Talia didn't hear from Zevrian again for 3 more days. No missed calls. No new messages. She assumed he had stopped trying. She hoped so. By now, she had found a rhythm. Wake up, morning tea, read, work, journal, evening walk. Her days were quiet but full. Her time belonged to her again. But quiet didn't mean healed, and full didn't mean whole. Some nights, she still woke up at 2 a.m., her body remembering the weight of another body beside it. Her hands reached out, instinctively, for someone who wasn't there anymore. Not because she wanted him back, but because routine takes time to forget. What helped most weren't big moments. They were the small ones. An older neighbor waving from his steps. A little boy offering her a flower from a cracked sidewalk. Callan fixing the crooked front step without saying a word about it. She didn't realize how much she'd been craving consistency until she finally had it. And then, one night, it broke again. She returned home from work, kicked off her shoes, placed her bag down, and walked to the kitchen to fill the kettle. She was halfway through unpacking groceries when there was a knock at the door. Soft, measured, familiar. She froze. Not because she didn't know who it was, but because she did. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Zevrian, alone, no entourage, no car idling behind him, just him, holding nothing but his hands in his coat pockets. She opened the door halfway, didn't invite him in. His eyes were tired, not bloodshot, not broken, just different, like someone who had started sleeping in silence and now hated the sound of it. "Talia," he said quietly. She didn't speak. "I wanted to see you. You did." He swallowed, looked at the floor, then back up. "I don't know how to explain myself. You don't need to. I know I hurt you. You didn't just hurt me," she said. "You erased me." He looked stunned, not insulted, not defensive, just stunned. "You disappeared from our life while standing right next to me." He nodded slowly. "I thought I was doing what was best. I thought giving you comfort was enough. I didn't realize I'd stopped giving you presence." "That's the problem," she said. "You thought your silence counted as care." He looked down again. She could tell he didn't come to fight. "That would have been easier." "I don't have excuses," he said. "Only mistakes." She crossed her arms. "Then why are you here?" "Because the house is empty without you. Because I walk into rooms and forget why I entered them. Because I thought I had time to fix things." Her jaw clenched, but she stayed calm. Time's not the problem. Attention was. He shifted on his feet. "I'm not here to beg," he said. "I'm not here to win you back overnight. I miss you. I miss the way you looked at me like I mattered beyond my title." "You stopped acting like you wanted that," she said. "I know." They stood in silence, the kind that used to break her. Now, it only proved her point. He glanced inside, saw her lavender plant on the counter, her books, her soft lamp, her life. "You built something here," he said. "I had to," she replied. "You left me no choice." He looked like he wanted to ask something but stopped himself. "Is there someone else?" he finally asked. She didn't lie. Yes. His face fell, not in shock, not in betrayal, but in realization. "Does he make you happy?" "He doesn't try to," she said. "He just shows up." "That's enough." He nodded once, long and slow. "Then I hope he never forgets what he has." She didn't close the door in his face. She stepped back, gently. "You should go now." He nodded again, and walked away. She stood there, her hand still resting on the edge of the door. It didn't hurt like she thought it would, because closure doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes, it's just the moment you realize you're no longer waiting for someone to understand you. The next morning, she told her mother what happened. They sat on the phone in silence before her mother spoke. "You didn't break," her mother said. "I didn't even bend," Talia whispered. "Good. You spent years folding yourself down to fit beside him. I'm glad you finally unfolded." She smiled, then wiped a quiet tear. Later that week, Callan passed her on the street. She didn't say anything at first. He looked over. "You okay?" "Yes." "Sure?" She nodded. "He came to see me." Callan didn't react. He kept walking beside her. "I told him the truth," she said. "Was that hard?" "Less than I expected." "You want to talk about it?" "No," she said. "I want to walk." So they did. No holding hands, no declarations, just steps that matched each other's pace. Sometimes healing sounds like silence between two people who don't need noise to feel connected. That night, she lit a candle in the kitchen, brewed tea, wrote one last line in her journal before closing it. "I used to feel invisible. Now I feel unshakable." And she slept through the night, without reaching for anything but her own peace. Talia walked into the wellness center that morning with something new in her chest. Not relief, not joy, but weightlessness. Like someone had taken the burden of waiting, of wondering, of what if, and quietly removed it from her shoulders. She wasn't smiling for show. She wasn't performing peace. She was simply free. Her co-worker Monica noticed first. "You cut your hair," she said, eyeing the soft new curls framing Talia's face. "Felt right," Talia said. Monica tilted her head, then added, "You look different." "I feel different." No follow-up questions, just a warm grin. Talia walked into her office, opened the windows, and let the breeze touch her skin. There was no plan, no grand update, just air, just now. Meanwhile, Zevrian sat across from a board of investors, nodding at projections he barely heard. His CTO was speaking. Numbers were on the screen, but Zevrian couldn't stop looking at the empty chair beside him. It used to be hers. Not officially, but it had always belonged to her. She sat through more pitches than she should have, smiled at stiff executives, chose appetizers at galas, answered when he didn't feel like talking, smoothed over deals with charm he never credited her for. Now it was just him, and the chair looked hollow. He closed his laptop early that day. His assistant called after him. He didn't answer. He drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before parking in front of the lake outside the city, the one they used to walk around when he was still building the company, and she still believed in his promises. He sat on a bench and stared at the water. Everything he touched turned to success, except her, because she wasn't something to be managed, or controlled, or out-earned. She had been real, and he'd only realized it after she disappeared. Talia didn't know where he was, and she didn't care. She was focused on something else now, a room full of women waiting for her. Her journaling group had doubled. Word spread. Her sessions became sacred space. Not therapy, not lectures, just honesty. She lit the candles, brewed the tea, and when they entered, she said what she always said. Right like no one's watching. One woman, fresh out of a breakup with a man who drained her light, asked, "But what if I don't know what to say?" Talia replied, "Then write the words you needed to hear that never came." The room fell still. Pens began to move. Tears came, softly. Quiet sobs that no one judged. She didn't comfort them with platitudes. She let them have their pain. She knew it was necessary, and when the session ended, the woman who had asked the question hugged her. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're the first person I've sat in a room with and didn't feel small." Talia's throat tightened, but she kept her composure, because she knew that feeling too well. That night, Callan knocked on her door again. This time, he wasn't holding a plant. "Just 2 mugs of something warm, chamomile with honey," he said. "You had a long week." She accepted it without a word. They sat on the front steps of her brownstone. Quiet streets, soft wind, a car passing every few minutes. "You good?" he asked. "I think I am," she said. He nodded, took a sip. She glanced at him. "You don't ask much." "I try not to." "Why?" He shrugged. "Because people tell you what you need to know when they feel safe." She leaned back against the brick wall. "You make it easy." He smiled, but said nothing. They sat for over an hour. He didn't reach for her hand. She didn't offer it. But something passed between them. Not romantic pressure, not forced connection. Something slower, realer, something earned. Across town, Zevrian walked into the penthouse. It was too clean, too sterile. He stepped into the kitchen and opened the cabinet. All her favorite mugs were gone. He checked the linen closet. The soft towels she liked weren't there. He pulled open drawers. Nothing felt lived in anymore. The home he once thought she'd never leave now echoed like a museum of his own neglect. He walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. And this time, he let the grief come. Not the loud kind. The quiet, soul-heavy kind that seeps into your bones when you realize you weren't wronged. You were the reason. Talia slept peacefully that night. Not because the past had vanished, but because it no longer controlled her. The next morning, she went for a walk. She stopped by the local flower shop and bought sunflowers for her front window. She came home and found a small envelope slipped under her door. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note in Zevrian's handwriting. 3 lines. "You don't owe me a reply, but thank you for teaching me what presence means. I hope you're safe, and I hope you're smiling." She folded the note in half, didn't tear it, didn't frame it. She placed it in the back of her desk drawer, not as a memory, as a reminder that she survived being unseen, and she never had to return to that again. Talia didn't respond to the note, not because she hated him, because she had nothing left to say. Her silence wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. He had finally realized what she needed, but only after she stopped needing it from him. So she let that chapter close, completely. That weekend, she cleared out her phone, deleted old messages, archived old photos, not out of pain, but because she was making room. She was living again, and she didn't need reminders of a version of herself that no longer existed. The next morning, she opened her closet and saw only things she'd chosen for herself. Soft clothes, neutral colors, no designer tags, nothing chosen to impress, only pieces that fit her, not an image. She dressed, stepped out onto the porch with a fresh cup of tea, and watched the sun stretch over the quiet street. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't viral, it wouldn't be in magazines, but this life was hers, and it was enough. Callan knocked at 10. This time, she had been expecting him. He held a small tray. "Homemade breakfast," he said. "I can't vouch for the presentation." She stepped aside and let him in. He set the tray on the table, scrambled eggs, toast, jam in a tiny glass bowl. "You made jam?" He shrugged. "Well, I opened a jar. Same effort, less glory." She smiled and sat across from him. They ate in easy silence. After a few minutes, he asked, "You all right with me being here?" "Yes," he nodded. "Because I don't want to feel like I'm standing in someone else's shadow." "You're not." He waited. I saw him. We spoke. "It's over." Callan took a slow sip of his drink, then set the cup down. "Did you love him?" "Yes." "Do you still?" She paused, then said, "I loved him the way a quiet person loves someone loud." hoping their silence will be enough to earn space. Callan didn't reply. He only nodded, absorbing her words. She added, "But now I love myself more than I miss him." Callan leaned back slightly in his chair, hands resting comfortably on the sides. "Then I'm honored to be standing where you can see me." They didn't touch, but the room felt warmer, like something real had settled between them, soft, slow, grounded. Later that week, the center hosted a community event, an open-air session, healing through journaling. Talia had organized it with care. 50 people showed up, some with notebooks, some with tears, some just with hope. Callan arrived quietly. He stayed at the back, didn't approach her, didn't interrupt, but when she scanned the crowd, she found his eyes. And in that small connection, she felt anchored. She spoke to the crowd gently. Sometimes the person we need to forgive most is ourselves, for staying too long, for not seeing what was obvious, for shrinking. She paused. I shrank in my own life once, and the day I stopped trying to be palatable was the day I began to heal. Heads nodded. Pens moved. When it ended, people lined up to thank her. She stood by the table, offering hugs, soft words and warm glances. Callan waited until the crowd thinned. He approached last. "You were honest," he said. "I always try to be." He stepped closer. "I'd like to take you out. Not to distract you, not to fill space, just to be with you. Wherever that takes us." She studied his face. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't rushing. And she wasn't afraid. "Yes," she said. They didn't do anything grand. Just dinner. A small local spot where people ate slow and talked softer. They sat near the window. He asked about her childhood. She asked about his family. He told her about growing up on the edge of the city, about learning the names of trees before he learned the names of luxury cars. She told him about the bookstore, about the smell of old pages, about falling in love with silence before it ever betrayed her. He didn't lean across the table. She didn't bat her eyelashes. It wasn't a performance. It was two people choosing to meet, not as rescues but as equals. When he walked her home, he didn't assume anything. He didn't try to kiss her. He said, "I'll see you tomorrow." She said, "You will." That night, she stood at her window, watching the street. The same sidewalk that once carried her pain now felt like it carried possibility. She walked to her desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out the note from Zevrian one last time. She read it once, then folded it again and slid it into the back of a book, not to hold on to him, to remember how far she'd come. Somewhere across the city, Zevrian watched a video clip of her speaking at the event. Someone had posted it. She wasn't looking into the camera. She didn't know she was being recorded, but her words hit him harder than any confrontation ever could. "I shrank in my own life once." He paused the video, closed the laptop. He had everything, and lost her, not because she was weak, but because she finally stopped waiting to be chosen. Talia stood in the kitchen, barefoot, sipping from a ceramic mug Callan had brought her last week. It was plain, hand-painted, the words soft written in lowercase script near the rim. She liked it more than anything expensive that ever sat in her old penthouse. She looked around the apartment. Nothing matched perfectly. The furniture didn't follow a palette. The walls weren't filled with curated art. But everything inside was hers, and everything inside was peaceful. It had been 3 months since she walked out of her marriage, and every day that passed she felt more like herself, and less like the version of her who waited in silence for affection that never came. The world didn't fall apart when she left. It rebuilt itself in smaller, safer pieces. Later that morning, she walked through the park with her co-worker Rena, who had recently gone through a separation of her own. "He texted me last night," Rena said, chewing the inside of her cheek. "Said he misses what we had." Talia raised an eyebrow. Did he mention what he did with it when he had it? Rena laughed. "You're colder than I thought." "I'm not cold. I'm clear." Rena nodded slowly. "I need to get there." "You will." They kept walking. No more was needed. Callan showed up around 2. He didn't knock. He texted, You up for a walk, or should I circle the block and pretend I never asked? She grinned. Come in. Doors open. He stepped in carrying 2 bottled waters and a sandwich wrapped in brown paper. I got you turkey, he said. You strike me as a turkey person. She took it and asked, Is that a compliment? Depends on how you eat it. They sat on the stoop again. No big declarations, no pressure, just 2 people eating in quiet, broken by shared glances and laughter when a squirrel tried to snatch a bite. You ever think about starting over somewhere else? He asked after a pause. She looked up. Like a new city? Not just the city, the whole thing. New job, new rhythm, clean break. She considered it, maybe once. But now I think I'd rather stay and write a new story in the same place. One that doesn't erase what happened. One that grows out of it. He nodded. That's braver. Running is easy, she said. Reclaiming is harder. He looked at her like he saw more than what was on the surface, like he always did. That evening, she lit candles in the apartment and played a soft playlist while she cooked. She didn't use recipes. She made what felt right. Callan came over around 8. He brought nothing. She didn't ask for anything. They sat across from each other at the table, the light low, the music barely a whisper in the background. This is good, he said, chewing. Like, surprisingly good. Like someone who grew up feeding other people. I did, she said. My mom used to cook for the whole neighborhood on Saturdays. It's how she loved people, through food. He wiped his mouth, leaned back. You do that too, he said. She tilted her head. Cook? No, love like that. You're careful, but it's not guarded. You just love without noise. She looked down for a moment. That used to feel invisible to people, not to me. After dinner, they sat on the couch. He didn't rush anything. He didn't try to lead anything. But this time, she did. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he stayed perfectly still, like he didn't want to ruin the moment. She let herself breathe there. His shoulder wasn't tense. His breathing didn't change. He just let her be. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded. This is new. But it doesn't scare me. It shouldn't. She pulled back and looked at him, then leaned in and kissed him once. Soft, slow, sure. When they pulled apart, she whispered, I want this to go slow. He nodded. We've got time. And somehow that felt better than passion, because this time she was choosing from fullness, not from a need to be filled. Across the city, Zevrian sat in his office, alone. No one knew where he was. He had cleared his schedule for the day. No meetings, no obligations. He had spent weeks looking busy but doing nothing. The company ran itself. His name was still printed on the glass. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a throne. It felt like a cage. He stared out the window, wondering if Talia was still lighting candles in the evening, if she had filled her bookshelf again, if she was walking barefoot on warm wood floors without tiptoeing around someone else's ego. He had everything, and still lost her, because he thought building a legacy meant controlling the world. She had only asked for presence, and he never delivered it. He picked up his phone, opened his notes app, and wrote, You gave me more grace than I ever earned. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become the man I should have been when I had you. He didn't send it. He closed the app. He sat in silence, learning how it felt to live in the absence of the one person who never made him feel like a trophy. Talia didn't think about him that night. She stood at her open window, sipping from her soft mug. And when Callan leaned into the frame from behind, kissed her shoulder, and whispered, This life suits you, she smiled. Because it did. Talia had never realized how loud silence could be until she finally started living in peace. The kind of silence she lived with now wasn't heavy. It wasn't filled with unspoken expectations or swallowed disappointments. It was light. It let her think. It let her breathe. Some mornings she didn't speak until mid-afternoon. She'd write, clean, stretch, sit on the porch with a second cup of tea, and there was no tension in the air, no waiting for a voice to explain why it hadn't shown up emotionally again. This new rhythm wasn't exciting, but it was healing. And it was hers. Callan didn't try to fill space either. He worked with his hands. He came home tired. Sometimes they didn't talk much when he came by. Sometimes they just lay across from each other on the couch, feet tangled, barely speaking. That was what she valued most. He didn't require her to entertain him. He didn't take her stillness personally, and he never acted like her past made her too complicated to love. One afternoon, she came home to find a brown envelope slipped under her door again. But this time, it wasn't from Zevrian. It was from the legal team. Final divorce papers. Signed. Filed. Closed. There was no handwritten note. No message. No, "I wish you well." Just a stamped copy with her new legal name, Talia Reeve. She stood in the hallway holding it. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Then she walked to the kitchen, set the envelope down, and pulled out her journal. She opened a fresh page and wrote, "I am no longer someone's wife. I am no longer someone's silence. I am no longer someone's shadow. I am mine." Finally. That night, she invited Callan to stay for dinner again. They cooked together this time. He cut vegetables. She stirred the sauce. They moved around the kitchen like they'd done it 100 times before, though it was only the third. After the plates were cleaned and the leftovers packed away, he leaned against the counter. "You seem lighter tonight." "I got the final papers." He didn't look surprised. "Are you okay?" "I'm relieved, but also a little sad." "That's normal. I didn't expect it to hit me this way." Callan nodded. "You closed a chapter you thought would be your whole story." She nodded. "Exactly. But you didn't stop writing." She looked up at him. He stepped forward, slow, steady. "I'm not asking to be your next chapter," he said. "I just want to be someone you don't have to rewrite yourself for." She didn't respond with words. She leaned forward and kissed him. Deeper this time, more sure. Because this wasn't the kiss of escape. This was the kiss of someone stepping into something with both feet. They didn't rush intimacy. There was no urgency to claim, to prove, to replace what had been lost. Instead, they took their time, touching her hand as they passed each other, sitting close enough to feel the heat of the other without needing to fill the silence. Falling asleep with a hand on her back, not a demand for more. One night, she looked at him across her bedroom and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For never making me feel like I have to choose between my peace and your presence." He smiled. "You don't have to choose," he said. "You just have to receive." And she did. Across the city, Zevrian had stopped sleeping. He didn't go out much anymore. He declined events, even the major tech gala that usually gave him prime press coverage. His assistant told reporters he was focusing on internal strategy. What he was really doing was learning what solitude felt like when it wasn't chosen. He used to think being alone made him more productive. Now he understood it just made him easier to tolerate, because no one was there to see what he was refusing to feel. He hadn't reached out again, not because he didn't want to, because he finally respected her silence. He began attending therapy on his own. No media knew. No statements were made. It wasn't redemption. It was accountability. The kind that begins only after you lose something your name can't buy back. Talia, meanwhile, flourished quietly. She started writing again, not just journaling, but full pieces. Essays. Reflections. She submitted one to a local wellness magazine. They published it. Title: "The Day I Stopped Waiting to Be Chosen." The feedback was instant. Women emailed the center. Some showed up in person. One left a note on the door. "Thank you for saying what I never knew how to." Callan saw the article. He didn't bring it up right away. When he finally did, he said, "It didn't feel like I was reading your pain. It felt like I was reading your power." She smiled. "Some days it still feels like both." "Then let it be both," he said. "You don't have to pick one." The city was changing too. Leaves shifted color. Mornings cooled. Sweaters replaced sundresses. And as the season turned, so did her spirit. She had gone from abandoned to anchored, from unseen to unshakable. And she didn't owe that to anyone but herself. One evening, walking past a bakery, she saw a child drop his snack. Without thinking, she bent down, helped him gather what he could, smiled at his mother, and said, "It's okay. Accidents don't have to ruin everything." The woman looked tired, grateful. And in that moment, Talia realized how far she'd come. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was giving again. But now, she poured from a full cup. Talia stood by the center's front window, holding a clipboard and watching the late morning sunlight spill across the walkway. The air was mild, the kind of soft fall day that made people slow down without realizing it. Golden leaves curled at the edges of the sidewalk. Everything felt calm. She glanced at the schedule. A full group session later in the day, followed by a one-on-one with a new attendee. Her name was Ayla. No last name listed, no personal details beyond recovering from emotional detachment. Talia folded the clipboard to her chest. She understood that phrase too well. Later that afternoon, Ayla arrived. She was younger than Talia expected, early 20s maybe. Wide eyes, a too quiet voice, shoulders curled forward, like she was always apologizing for her presence. She sat across from Talia with her hands folded in her lap, wrists thin, lips pressed into a faint line. "I'm not sure I'm in the right place," she said first. "That's what most people say when they've been in the wrong place too long," Talia answered. That broke something. Ayla's eyes filled instantly. She didn't weep. She blinked hard and nodded, then let her story unfold. Her boyfriend had never hit her, never screamed. He wasn't cruel, but he made her feel invisible, one careful, dismissive word at a time. She used to dream of moving in together. Then she moved in and realized he never actually wanted a partner, just someone to orbit him. "I stopped laughing," she said, voice cracking. "He never told me to, but I just did. It didn't feel welcome anymore." Talia didn't speak for a long time. Then she leaned in gently and said, "You're not crazy for noticing quiet control." Ayla's breath trembled. "You deserve a life where you're allowed to take up space," Talia added. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then Ayla smiled, just a little, and said, "I think I want to come back." Talia nodded. "We'll be here." After Ayla left, Talia returned to her office and sat in silence. Not a heavy silence, a full one, because now her pain wasn't wasted. It was a bridge. Callan met her after work. He leaned against his truck, arms folded, eyes tracking her steps like he'd waited all day to see her, even if he'd seen her just hours earlier. "You look tired," he said. "I am." "Come on." They didn't go far. Just a quiet park 2 blocks down. Empty benches. A winding trail. Ducks in the distance by the small pond. He brought a blanket. Spread it under a tree. No music. No wine. Just them. Talia laid back, eyes closed. The kind of tired that comes from offering so much of your spirit to others. Callan sat beside her, fingers tracing the curve of her arm slowly. "You gave someone a piece of your light today, didn't you?" She nodded. "And now you need someone to hold space for you." She turned her head and looked at him. "You're good at this." He shrugged. "You're easy to care for when I'm not trying to fix you." Her eyes softened. He wasn't flashy. He didn't try to win her with grand gestures. He just showed up, again and again. Like love didn't have to be earned, only offered. Back at the brownstone that night, Talia lit one of the candles Callan had brought weeks ago. She curled up in her chair, feet tucked beneath her, reading submissions for the next wellness newsletter. She paused at one line. "I stopped whispering to make other people feel louder." She stared at the sentence. She understood it down to the bone. Her entire marriage had been a practice in silence, of not asking too many questions, of not making requests when he looked tired, of not interrupting him when he was focused on more important things. And now? She made noise when she wanted. She didn't explain her feelings in soft disclaimers. She asked for what she needed. And still, no one left. That was the difference. The next morning, Callan showed up with coffee and said, "You've got a delivery downstairs." She blinked. "I didn't order anything." He grinned. Might be something personal. She walked down to the entrance and found a small, flat package resting on the porch bench. No label. Just her name, handwritten. Inside, a framed photo. The bookstore her parents owned, years ago, with her and her mother standing outside it, arms around each other, both mid-laugh. She hadn't seen this image in nearly a decade. At the bottom of the frame, carved into the wood, were the words, "Don't forget where your light began." She turned the frame over and found a note tucked behind it. From Mom. Saw this and thought, this is the girl I raised. You haven't lost her. You just had to come back to her on your own. Talia sat on the stairs holding the frame, heart swelling in a way it hadn't in months. She texted her mother 2 words, "Thank you," then sat there quietly for a while. Not because she needed space, but because her life finally felt like it had room. Later that evening, she invited Callan over for dinner. He brought his favorite wine. She cooked something new. They talked while standing at the counter. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm just taking it all in, good or bad." Grateful. She leaned on the counter and looked at him. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what I want going forward." His brow lifted slightly. "Yeah? I don't need a new label or a new title. I don't want to recreate the past with someone new. I just want something real, daily, consistent, gentle." He stepped closer. "You have that," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. I know." He leaned in, kissed her once, then again, slower. His hands stayed at her waist, respectful but warm. She let herself sink into him. She wasn't in a rush. She wasn't afraid. She was steady, and this time, the love didn't feel like pressure. It felt like presence. They didn't talk much after the kiss. They didn't need to. Callan moved around the kitchen, pouring water into their glasses. Talia cleared the dishes. Their movements overlapped like music with no beat, familiar, easy, unhurried. After cleaning up, they sat on the couch again. But this time, Talia leaned into him more fully, her head on his chest, his arm around her waist. His body was warm, his presence steady. He didn't stroke her arm or press for more. He just held her, like stillness was enough. And it was. For the first time in years, her skin didn't tense under someone else's hands. Her shoulders didn't brace for expectation. This wasn't obligation masked as intimacy. This was softness without demand. "I'm thinking of going back to writing full-time," she said into the quiet. Callan's voice was low. "You should. I've been afraid." "Of what?" "That no one would care. That it wouldn't mean anything." He looked down at her. "It already means something. You've helped more people in the last 3 months than some people help in a lifetime. That's different. That's community work." "Exactly. It's real. You're not chasing attention, you're offering truth. That matters." She exhaled. "I've been sitting with some pieces I haven't published yet. They're personal. Then that's what makes them powerful." She tilted her head up slightly. "You believe that? I believe in you." The room held those words like they were holy. The next day, she submitted 2 essays anonymously to an online magazine that focused on healing, betrayal, and emotional recovery. She didn't expect much. She didn't tell anyone. She hit send and went for a walk. She passed a bookstore and stopped in front of the window without stepping inside. She used to dream of having her own shelf there someday, not to be famous, just to feel seen in a quiet way. Maybe now, that dream didn't have to stay small. She smiled to herself, then continued walking. By the time she returned home, a reply waited in her inbox. The magazine had accepted both essays. The editor left a message. "Your voice is subtle but hits deep. We'd love to feature more from you. No edits needed." Talia blinked at the screen. No edits, no changes, just her words as they were. She sat down, breathed deep, and let that settle. This wasn't validation. This was confirmation. She'd found her voice again, and the world hadn't rejected it. That night, she invited Callan for tea. No agenda, no announcement. He stepped inside and noticed the smile she hadn't tried to hide. You look calm. I got published. His brows lifted, then relaxed. You sent... She nodded. He smiled, walked over, and kissed her once. Proud of you. That was it. No fanfare. No suggestions. No questions about money, strategy, next steps. Just support. The kind that stayed quiet and strong in the background, letting her be the center of her own story. They spent that night on the floor of her living room, surrounded by pillows and soft blankets. A jazz playlist ran quietly in the background. He told her about his childhood dog, a scrappy mutt named Dune, who used to steal socks and bury them in the garden. She told him about her first published poem in 6th grade, printed on school paper and read aloud at assembly while she hid behind a curtain. They laughed. They listened. Then they fell asleep on the floor, wrapped in quiet comfort. It wasn't glamorous. It was better. It was real. Days passed. Talia continued to write. She started building a small online portfolio. Quiet essays. Intimate stories. Honest, steady words that resonated deeply with strangers. She didn't post about her past. She didn't mention Zevrian. But she didn't hide what she'd learned either. She wrote, "Healing isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming every part of you that someone treated like an afterthought." Her inbox filled with replies. People saw her. They didn't know the full story, but they felt it. And that was enough. One afternoon, she got a call from her mother. "I read one of your pieces. You found them. I know you're writing." Talia waited. Her mother said, "I cried, not because I was sad, because I was proud. You took everything we couldn't teach you in words and turned it into something that helps people." Talia felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she whispered. Her mother added, "You've always been whole, Talia. You just stopped waiting for someone to prove it." Later that week, she stood in the mirror. No makeup, no styled hair, no perfect outfit, just herself. And she whispered the words, "I'm proud of you." Not because she had done something big, but because she had stayed true. Because she had left. Because she had survived. Because she had healed. That evening, Callan brought over dinner. Fried chicken and mashed potatoes from a family-run restaurant he swore by. They ate on the floor again, and when they were done, he asked, "What's next?" "I don't know," she said, "but I'm not afraid of it." "Then I'll be here," he replied. "However it looks." She looked at him long and steady. "You're not just here for now, are you?" "No." "Good." Then she kissed him slow and sure, no longer from pain or need, but from something deeper. From choice. Have you ever had to rebuild your peace from the ground up? If you've ever walked away from someone who didn't see your worth, or started over even when it scared you, then this part of the story is for you. Tell us in the comments what your healing looks like. And if this story speaks to you, like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. There's more ahead, and you're not going to want to miss what's coming next. The magazine that published Talia's essays asked her to write a featured column. It wasn't flashy. It didn't pay much. But it gave her a platform, and more importantly, it gave her a voice. She said yes. The editor sent over the details. Monthly column. Full creative freedom. No branding tone or performance keywords. Just her, telling the truth. That afternoon, she sat in her corner chair, soft playlist in the background, and opened a new document. She titled it, "The Ache That Teaches You to Listen to Yourself Again." It was raw, honest, not bitter. She wasn't speaking to the man who broke her. She was speaking to the woman who stayed for too long, the version of herself who thought being loyal meant being quiet. When she typed the last line, her hands shook a little. Not from fear, from release. This wasn't for applause. It was a testimony. That night, Callan came over with a 6-pack of ginger beer and a folder tucked under his arm. "What's that?" she asked, nodding to the folder. He sat at the table and spread out a few sketches. Garden layouts, patio options, a sketch of a small greenhouse. "This client I'm working with, she wants to turn her backyard into a reflection space, not just plants, stillness, water, walking path." I thought of you while working on it. She sat beside him, eyes scanning the drawings. They're beautiful. He glanced at her. You've got that in your eyes when you're writing. Focused, quiet, present. She smiled. I think I'm starting to feel like myself again. Callan tapped the center of the page. That's the goal, right? Peace that doesn't depend on someone else to hand it to you. The next morning, she woke up to a notification. The magazine had published her new column early. She clicked the link. She read it as if someone else had written it. The words felt heavier on screen than they did in her journal, like they carried more weight now that the world could see them. At the bottom were dozens of comments. One said, I didn't leave when I should have, but I'm going to now. Thank you. Another, your words feel like a mirror I've been avoiding. And one more, I've never heard someone write my thoughts out loud. You gave me language for the ache. Talia stared at the screen and whispered, it mattered. Because it did, not just to others, to her. That weekend, she traveled home to visit her parents. First time since she left Zevrian. The drive was quiet. Familiar streets, old gas stations, the bakery where her mom used to buy cinnamon rolls on Saturday mornings. She parked in front of the bookstore and stood for a long moment before walking in. The bell chimed. Her mother looked up from the counter, eyes softening instantly. Took you long enough, she said. Talia stepped forward and hugged her. Tight, long. Her father walked in from the back and nodded once, his version of I missed you more than I'll say. They sat at the back of the shop. Coffee, peach muffins, old records playing low. No one asked about Zevrian. No one tiptoed. They just made space for her, the way they always had. Later that afternoon she walked around the house. Her old bedroom was still intact. Posters on the wall. Her bookshelf still in order. The mirror framed with Polaroids of high school friends she hadn't spoken to in years. She sat on the bed and looked around. She didn't feel sad. She felt proud, because this was where she came from, and she didn't betray it by becoming quieter. She honored it now by returning stronger. Back in the city, Zevrian sat in his office watching the stock ticker blink. Numbers kept rising. His company was thriving. But inside, he was still trying to reconcile the truth. His greatest loss wasn't financial. It was human. Talia's name hadn't trended. No tabloids had picked up the divorce. Because she didn't need attention. And still, her voice was now everywhere. People were quoting her essays. Even his assistant forwarded him one, not realizing who wrote it. Zevrian read it 3 times in a row, not for shame. For understanding. He didn't blame her. He blamed himself for not noticing the power of the quiet person sitting beside him all those years. That evening, Talia sat on her childhood porch, phone in hand. Callan had texted, "Hope your heart feels full tonight, and if not, I'll help refill it tomorrow." She didn't reply right away. She just held the phone, smiling. Then finally texted back, "I'm bringing you peach muffins. You'll owe me a lifetime of thank yous." He replied in seconds. "Deal. 1 thank you per bite. I'll owe you forever." She laughed, the kind of laugh she used to lose, the kind that didn't apologize for being happy again. Talia returned from her parents' home on a quiet Monday afternoon. The drive back into the city felt shorter than usual. Not because she was rushing, but because her heart wasn't heavy anymore. There was no dread. No anxiety waiting for her on the other side of the city skyline. Her apartment welcomed her with stillness. Books still stacked where she left them. The lavender Callan had brought weeks ago still blooming on the windowsill. She walked in, dropped her bag gently, and sat on the edge of her couch. Her home, her peace, her rhythm. She let out a long, slow breath. Callan texted that evening, "You back in town?" She replied, "Yes." "Want to come by?" 20 minutes later, there was a knock. She opened the door to him standing there with a bag of oranges and a pack of her favorite tea. "I brought gifts," he said. She tilted her head. "What's the occasion?" "No reason. You just looked peaceful last time I saw you. Wanted to bring something that matched." She stepped aside and let him in. They made tea together, peeled the oranges, sat on the floor with their backs against the couch, bare feet stretched out over the rug. "I read your latest piece," Callan said. "You did?" "Twice." She glanced over, eyebrows raised. "I think it's my favorite one." "Why?" He peeled another orange slice slowly before answering. "Because it didn't sound like you were surviving anymore. It sounded like you were speaking from the other side of it." Talia didn't speak right away. Then, with her voice low, she said, "That's exactly where I wrote it from." He reached over and tucked one of her curls behind her ear. No words, just a touch that felt like stillness. Outside, the city moved as usual. Sirens in the distance, horns, conversations on balconies. But inside, her world felt slower, safe. She leaned against Callan's shoulder, and he pulled her a little closer. "I think I'm falling in love with this," she whispered. "With what?" he asked. "With feeling like I don't have to prove anything." He nodded once. "That's what love should feel like." The next morning, she woke up to sunlight cutting through the blinds and a text from her editor. "We've received over 400 emails in response to your latest piece." One reader said she read it on the floor of her closet and finally stood up. Talia stared at the message, then put the phone down and wiped a tear. Not from sadness, from impact, from knowing that every page she once wrote in silence now held space for someone else's breakthrough. Later that week, she and Callan visited a local nursery. Not for anything special, just because she wanted to pick out a new plant for her kitchen window. He walked beside her, hands in his pockets, offering quiet opinions on succulents and herbs. When she picked up a trailing pothos, he said, "That one's going to take over your whole kitchen." She smiled. "I don't mind being surrounded by life." He paused, then said, "You already are." They left with 3 pots, a small watering can, and a ceramic turtle she didn't need but couldn't leave behind. That evening, she repotted the plants while Callan sat on the floor, reading her old print journals aloud with her permission. He stopped halfway through one and looked up. "You used to write like you were whispering to yourself." "I was," she said. "I didn't think anyone else would want to hear it." "You were wrong." She smiled. "I'm glad I was." Across the city, Zevrian stood in front of his floor-to-ceiling office window, staring at nothing. His company had just secured another round of funding. The media was calling him a visionary, but none of it landed. He had spent the last few weeks watching clips of Talia's readings, events she didn't post about, but that quietly went viral through word of mouth and private shares. He never once interrupted her path with his presence again. Not because he didn't think about it, because now he finally understood that real remorse sometimes means staying away and letting someone's peace remain untouched. He had power, access, reach, but none of it could bring her back. She didn't leave because he failed. She left because she outgrew a space that never let her breathe fully. Back at her brownstone, Talia placed her new plant on the window ledge and watched it settle in the light. Callan walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. They stood like that for a long time. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to, because she had found everything she used to beg for without ever having to beg again. And now, every quiet moment was no longer a signal of abandonment. It was a sign she was home. Talia no longer kept her phone face down. There was nothing she was hiding. No call she dreaded. No text that could knock the wind out of her. The phone was simply a tool now, not a lifeline, not a leash. She didn't flinch when it rang. She didn't pause when a number popped up unrecognized. Healing hadn't made her harder. It made her freer. She checked the time, 9:27 a.m., and placed the phone in her bag as she stepped out the door with a canvas tote over her shoulder. Today was a good day. She was speaking at a local women's writing circle, an invitation extended by someone who had read her work online and insisted she come as herself, not as a performance. Those were the words that made her say yes. The event took place in a cozy library downtown, not flashy. Brick walls, soft lighting, and a table of fresh muffins that reminded her of home. Talia arrived 10 minutes early. The organizer, a woman named Lainey, greeted her with an awkward hug and a shaky smile. "I just wanted to say," Lainey whispered, "you wrote something last month that made me end a relationship I'd been stuck in for years. I haven't been able to say thank you in person. Until now." Talia took her hand, gave it a gentle squeeze, and replied, "You did that. My words were just a mirror." Lainey's eyes watered. "I'm still learning to believe that." "That's okay," Talia said. "Belief takes time." When it was time to speak, Talia didn't bring notes. She didn't need them. She stood in front of the group, 15 women seated in a circle, notebooks open, pens ready, eyes alert but tired, and took a slow breath. Then she said, "I spent years being quiet to keep someone else comfortable. I didn't call it silence back then. I called it strength. But strength that makes you invisible is just survival with better manners." The room didn't move. No one blinked. She continued, "I left that life not because I hated him, but because I realized I loved myself too little. And now, I speak. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when no one claps." A few heads bowed. Some hands wrote faster. She softened her voice. "You are not hard to love. You were just asking for love from someone who needed control more than connection." That's when the first tear hit someone's page, and she let the silence linger. Not because she didn't have more to say, but because sometimes people need a moment to let truth land. After the session, one woman stood in the hallway beside her and said, "I didn't realize how much I needed to hear a stranger say it first." Talia smiled. "Sometimes strangers say what people close to us are afraid to." "Will it always hurt like this?" "No," she said. "But it will always remind you what you survived." She walked home that day without music in her ears. The noise of the city was enough. A dog barked. A car honked. Someone shouted across the street. A toddler squealed near a bakery. And still, her peace didn't shrink. She passed by a shop window and caught her reflection. Same woman, but not the same posture. Her shoulders were back, her eyes steady. Her body didn't fold inward like it used to. She looked like someone who wasn't scared of being seen anymore. Callan met her on the porch. He was wearing a worn t-shirt and jeans, hair still messy from working outdoors. There was a streak of dirt on his wrist, and somehow it made him look even more grounded. He stood up when she reached the steps. Hey, how was it?" She smiled. "They cried." He laughed once. "Of course they did." She sat beside him, leaned her head back, and let the sun hit her face. He glanced at her. "You know you've changed, right?" She looked over. "How?" "You don't walk like you're trying to disappear anymore." That hit deep. She didn't respond. She just leaned into him, and he let her rest. That evening, she pulled out one of her older journals, not to wallow, just to remember. She flipped to an entry from the early days of her marriage. Maybe this is what real love looks like, being patient while they grow, even if it leaves you waiting in the cold. She traced the words with her finger. She didn't judge her past self. That woman wrote what she knew. She did her best with what she had. But now, she knew better. She closed the journal and placed it back on the shelf, not as evidence of failure, but as a record of growth. She looked around the apartment and realized something. It no longer looked like a recovery space. It looked like a home. Pothos vines stretched across the window. The candle wax was low from use. There were tiny scratches on the hardwood from furniture she'd moved herself. Everything inside had been chosen with care. Everything told the story of a woman who came back to life, one intentional day at a time. That night, she and Callan walked to the corner for ice cream. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. But as they turned toward home, he reached for her hand and held it openly. Not for show, just because he wanted to. She let their fingers stay laced, feeling the ease in her body. No tension, no second-guessing, just warmth. Talia sat at her kitchen table the next morning with a warm croissant in one hand and her laptop open in front of her. She wasn't scrolling. She was writing. The words came slowly, but they didn't stop. She'd started a draft of something new. Not an essay, Not a letter. Something deeper. The beginning of a book. A story rooted in truth, shaped by her own past, but not just hers. A story for anyone who'd ever been told that quiet love had to come with self-erasure. For anyone who had stayed, hoping consistency would eventually feel like connection. She wrote 3 pages, then stopped, breathed. She didn't feel rushed. This didn't need to prove anything. It only needed to be true. By noon, she walked down to the local bookstore to drop off a small stack of essays she'd printed out for a few women from the writing circle. Lainey had offered to place them in a basket near the register, a quiet corner where people could take what they needed, no questions asked. When Talia arrived, Lainey was restocking shelves. "You came," she said with a big grin. "I always finish what I start. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." They talked briefly about the next event. Lainey mentioned someone had come into the shop looking for her work, but hadn't wanted to ask directly. Talia smiled. "I think quiet readers are my favorite." "Why?" "Because they don't need noise. They just need truth." That afternoon, she went home and made soup. No occasion. Just a slow day, soft music, and the scent of garlic and thyme filling her space. Callan showed up around 4. No text this time. Just a gentle knock and a familiar rhythm. "I brought you something," he said, holding up a bag with 2 bowls and a loaf of bread. She tilted her head. "I just made soup." He raised a brow. "So, dinner for 4? She laughed. "Stay. Always." They ate together in the living room, both curled up under separate blankets, watching nothing in particular. A documentary they barely followed, 2 wrapped up in the comfort of each other's presence. When the credits rolled, she looked over. "Have you ever thought about what you'd tell your younger self?" she asked. Callan looked at her for a long moment. "I'd tell him that love isn't about proving you're strong. It's about finding someone you can be soft with and still feel safe." She swallowed, then said, "I'd tell mine that she was never too much. She was just always asking too little." He leaned closer, brushing a kiss across her cheek. The next morning, Talia found an envelope at her door again. But this one was different. It wasn't from her mother. It wasn't from the legal office. And it wasn't Zevrian's handwriting. Inside was a handwritten letter on cream paper with clean, deliberate strokes. "Talia, I've read your work. Every piece. Every line. And I recognize my shadow in every space you had to crawl out of." Her chest tightened. She sat down before continuing. "You don't owe me anything. Not conversation. Not closure. Not forgiveness. But I owe you acknowledgement. You gave me years of presence I took for granted. And now, I finally understand the difference between being admired and being truly known." There was no name signed at the bottom. But she didn't need one. She folded the letter slowly, then reached for her journal and wrote, "I didn't need him to say it. But now that he has, I know I'm free." She didn't share the letter with Callan, not because she was hiding it, but because it didn't matter to her future. She put it in a drawer with everything else she had let go of, quiet symbols of a past that no longer dictated her worth. That evening, she and Callan went to a poetry reading at a small studio downtown. A friend from her writing group was performing. The place was dim, the crowd mellow. People snapped instead of clapping. Talia read one piece aloud, just one. Afterward, a woman pulled her aside in the restroom. "You're the one who wrote the thing about shrinking in silence, right?" Talia nodded. The woman's eyes filled. "My daughter left a man who didn't see her last month. She read your work and told me, he doesn't get to be the last thing I survive." Talia's hand covered her mouth. The woman squeezed her shoulder and left. And for a few long seconds, Talia stood still. Because sometimes healing catches up to you in the hallway, not the stage. That night, she stood barefoot in her kitchen, the tile cool under her feet, and looked out into the dark sky. Callan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Long night?" he asked. "No, just a full one." He nodded. "Do you still want slow?" She turned in his arms. "Yes, but not stuck. I want us to keep moving, just without losing the stillness." He brushed his thumb along her jaw. "We're not going backward." "I know," she whispered. "We're growing, and I feel it." He kissed her, deep, patient, present, not like someone trying to convince her, like someone who knew she had already chosen him. And this time, when they moved from the kitchen to the bedroom, it wasn't out of loneliness or need. It was out of knowing. Because she wasn't giving her body to someone who didn't see her soul. She was opening herself to someone who had waited, who respected the pace, who loved her in quiet ways that felt louder than words. That night, nothing was rushed, nothing was taken, everything was given. And when she woke the next morning, arms tangled, skin warm, her first thought was not regret. It was this. This is what safety feels like. Not soft. Solid. The morning light peeked through Talia's blinds, painting the bedroom in soft strokes of gold and blue. The scent of lavender still lingered faintly in the air. She shifted under the blanket, stretching her legs across the cool sheets. Callan's arm was still around her, his breathing slow and even. For the first time in years, she woke up feeling rested, not from sleep, but from release, from the weight she'd carried for far too long. She turned slowly, careful not to wake him, and studied his face. The light touched his jaw, his closed eyes, the quiet ease on his features. He looked peaceful, not the kind of peace that came from winning, but from choosing differently, from choosing her, from letting go of the need to prove himself to the world and instead becoming present to what was real. Talia slipped out of bed, pulled on a soft robe, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The kettle whistled softly as she filled her mug with hot water and dropped in a slice of lemon. The morning felt still, not empty, just calm. She pulled her journal out from the drawer by the dining table and flipped to the page she'd written the night before. This is what safety feels like, not soft, solid. She ran her finger under the words once, then closed the book. There was nothing else to add, not today. Later that afternoon, Talia stopped by a small pop-up market in her neighborhood. There was a local vendor she loved, an older woman who sold fresh herbs and hand-blended teas. Callan had offered to come, but she'd told him to rest. She needed a little solitude, and he didn't take it personally. As she picked through bundles of dried mint, someone tapped her shoulder. She turned and froze. It was Zevrian's older sister, Camille. Camille wore her usual tailored blazer and polished demeanor, but there was something softer in her eyes, less guarded. "Talia," she said quietly, "do you have a minute?" Talia hesitated, then nodded. They stepped to the side, between stalls, where the crowd thinned, and the afternoon sun warmed the pavement. Camille didn't speak right away. She looked at her shoes, then back up. "I saw your name in the event list for the reading downtown. I didn't come. But I read the piece, the one about asking for less, just to feel loved." Talia's chest tightened. Camille continued, "It made me rethink some things, especially about how we all treated you, how I wasn't expecting you to. I know, and I'm not here for forgiveness, just clarity." Talia nodded slowly. "Clarity takes time. I didn't understand what you were going through back then. I thought if you stayed silent, you were fine. But now I know that sometimes silence is survival." Talia didn't respond. She didn't have to. Camille stepped closer. "I also came to say, I know Zev sent the letter. He asked me to deliver it, but I told him to do it himself. Looks like he listened." Talia looked up, caught off guard. Camille nodded. "He's not looking for a door back in. He knows there isn't one. But he's trying to face what he broke." There was a pause. Then Camille offered a faint smile. "You look happier, healthier. I'm glad." Talia offered a small smile back. "Thank you." Camille didn't linger. She simply touched her shoulder and disappeared back into the crowd. Talia stood there for a few minutes, the scent of basil and lemongrass filling the space around her, heart oddly steady. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't even sting. It simply was. That evening, Callan drove her to an old garden just outside the city. He hadn't told her where they were going, only said she'd like it. The car turned onto a narrow gravel road, flanked by tall trees and warm light posts. When they parked, she stepped out and looked around. There was a small greenhouse surrounded by roses, with soft music playing from inside. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice light. Callan offered his hand. "Come see." He led her through the arched entrance into the greenhouse. Inside, a private dinner table was set between the rows of plants, twinkle lights overhead, candles lit low. "You did this?" He nodded. "I wanted a quiet night. With you. Just us." She looked around, moved by the thoughtfulness more than the setting. He pulled out her chair. They sat, ate, talked, laughed. She learned more about his childhood that night, about his grandmother who raised him, about the first book that made him cry, about the teacher who told him he could write. "You ever think about writing again?" she asked. Callan looked down, then up. "I stopped thinking anyone would care about my words." "I would," she said simply. He reached across the table and brushed his thumb over her knuckles. "That's all the reason I need." Later, they danced. No choreography, no music, but what played faintly through a speaker tucked in the corner. Her head rested against his chest, his hand at her waist. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Their bodies knew the rhythm. And when they left that night, fingers intertwined, the silence between them felt full, not of what was unspoken, but of what had already been understood. The next morning, a message pinged on her phone. It was from the publishing contact Lainey had connected her with weeks ago. "We read your essays. Are you open to compiling them into a collection? We'd love to talk next steps." Talia sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the screen. Callan walked in, shirtless, towel over his shoulder. "You okay?" She turned slowly, holding up the phone. His face broke into a smile. "They reached out." She nodded. He walked over, crouched down, and took her hands. "This isn't just your moment. It's your voice being heard." Fully. Finally, her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was ready. "I want to do it," she said, "but only if I get to tell the truth. Not the polished version, the real one. Then tell it, and let them meet you there." She leaned forward and kissed him, slow and certain, then whispered, "Thank you for waiting." He kissed her forehead. "I wasn't waiting. I was growing until I could stand beside you." The next week unfolded slowly. Talia moved through her days with less tension in her shoulders. She went for walks in the mornings, sat on her porch with tea in the evenings, and started outlining the essays for the collection. She didn't feel pressure to be perfect. She felt permission to be honest. Callan worked quietly beside her most nights. They shared meals, music, and unspoken support. They didn't fill every moment with conversation, but what they shared was always full. One night, he pulled out an old box from his closet. Inside were letters, some unsent, others written but never shared. He handed her one. It was addressed to her. From 5 years ago. She looked at him, unsure. "Read it when you're ready," he said. "I wrote it during the worst part, when I didn't know who I was, without proving something." She read it that night. The letter wasn't perfect. The words stumbled, but the heart inside was raw. He had missed her long before he lost her, and he'd been trying to find his way back to himself, not just to her. She pressed the page to her chest and closed her eyes. It mattered now, because now it wasn't about fixing the past. It was about building something real from what remained. A few days later, Talia got a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Keegan. "You may want to check the local newspaper's lifestyle section." Confused, Talia clicked the link and scanned the article. The title made her pause. "Power, Public Image, and Redemption. When Billionaires Choose Privacy." Halfway through the article, there it was, Callan's name. A short profile, nothing scandalous, but it referenced how he stepped away from a powerful merger, turned down a conference spotlight, and returned to more personal pursuits. Talia looked up as he walked in, keys in hand. "You made the paper." He raised a brow. "Did the first?" She held up her phone. "They're calling you a quiet figure with surprising priorities." He smirked. "That's a compliment? In today's world?" "Absolutely." He sat beside her. They'll move on. They always do. But you didn't do it for the article. No, I did it because I'm tired of noise. I want meaning. She reached over, rested her palm on his knee. You found it? I'm looking at it. On Saturday, Talia visited her father. She hadn't told him everything, just that she'd been writing, taking more time for herself and letting things shift. He watched her closely as she poured tea in the living room. You seem different, he said. Is that good or bad? Good, he said after a pause. You're softer, but not smaller. She smiled. That's what it feels like. He took a slow sip. And the boy? She laughed. He's not a boy, and he's trying. Her father nodded once. Is he seeing you clearly now? I think so. He leaned forward. Then make sure you're still seeing yourself. She met his eyes. I am. That night, she and Callan stayed in. They cooked together. Simple pasta, garlic bread, salad. No pressure, no expectations. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, dancing to a slow song as he dried dishes behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist. I could get used to this, he whispered. She leaned back into him. Then do. The next morning, a small brown envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Talia opened it slowly. Inside was a photo of her and Zev from years ago at a gala. Her smile was wide. His arm was around her waist. On the back, one sentence, I chose wrong. And I live with it. There was no signature, but she knew who it was from. She didn't feel fear or regret, just finality. Callan noticed the envelope on the table later and glanced at her. Everything okay? She nodded. Just another chapter closed. He reached for her hand. And in that moment, she knew she didn't need revenge. She didn't need validation. She had peace. And she had presence. That was enough. Later that week, her publisher sent over a contract draft. Talia read it 3 times, then forwarded it to her lawyer, signed the page, and wrote back, I'll begin writing next week. The real version. Not the curated one. She closed the laptop and turned to Callan. I need to travel. He paused. Where? North Carolina. There's a cabin my aunt left me. I used to go there when I needed to think. He nodded slowly. Want company? She smiled. Maybe, after the first draft. He stepped forward and touched her chin. You're doing this? I am. He kissed her, then whispered against her lips, when you're ready, I'll be right here. She rested her forehead against his. I know. The next morning, she left for the cabin. The drive was long but peaceful. She rolled the windows down, let the wind tangle her hair, and played. A playlist that matched the rhythm of her heart, steady, open, hopeful. The cabin sat at the edge of a quiet lake. Still waters. Crickets in the distance. The same porch swing from her childhood, creaking as she settled into it. She didn't unpack right away. She just sat and breathed. For the next few days, she wrote, pages filled with raw memories, lessons, scars, and survival. She didn't write to impress. She wrote to understand. And when the sun set each night, she sat on the dock with her feet in the water, letting the coolness ground her. One night, she got a message. From Callan. I'm proud of you. I read something today that said, healing doesn't always look like smiling. It sometimes looks like writing through the tears. I hope you're doing both. She smiled, typed back. I am. Come visit this weekend. I'm ready. That weekend, he arrived with groceries, flowers, and a book she'd once said she wanted. He kissed her before even putting the bags down. She pulled him into the cabin. They didn't say much that night, but when they lay in bed, her back against his chest, his fingers tracing gentle lines down her arm, she whispered, I want a quiet life, one with meaning, one where my work speaks, where my love doesn't have to beg to be chosen. His lips brushed her neck. Then let's build that, day by day, with no noise. Just truth. She closed her eyes, and slept deeper than she had in years. The soft knock at her door on a rainy Thursday caught Talia off guard. She'd just returned from the cabin, her hair still loose from the wind, the scent of pine clinging to her sweater. She hadn't unpacked her bags yet. She was still in that in-between place, between stillness and return. She opened the door, and there stood Kalen, her cousin's son, 17, quiet, lanky but growing into himself. He looked soaked. "Can I come in?" "Of course." She moved aside, and he stepped in, dripping water onto her rug. He didn't say much at first. Just looked around, rubbing his sleeves. "You okay?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. "I just needed to be somewhere." Talia grabbed a towel from the hall closet and handed it to him. "Dry off. You're always welcome." He sat on the edge of the couch and looked down at his shoes. "I saw my dad yesterday." Talia froze. Kalen rarely talked about his father. The man had left his mother years ago, remarried, moved to another state. No contact, no visits, no calls. "I didn't plan to," Kalen added. "I was at the mall. He walked right past me with his new family." Talia sat beside him. "Did he recognize you?" Kalen shrugged. He looked at me. I looked at him. He didn't stop. Her heart tightened. "I wanted to say something," he said, "but I didn't. I felt stupid for wanting him to see me, to care." She touched his arm. "You're not stupid." Kalen looked up at her, eyes rimmed red. "Do dads ever realize what they gave up?" Talia didn't answer right away. She thought about Zev, about the moment she opened the door that day and saw him with someone else, about the silence that came after, the void, and she thought about Callan, about the quiet way he'd returned, not to prove a point, but to grow. "Sometimes," she said finally, "sometimes they realize too late, and sometimes they learn in time to show up differently." Kalen swallowed hard. "How do you forgive that?" "You don't do it for them," she whispered. "You do it so you don't carry the weight of their absence into your future." He nodded, blinking fast. "Want to stay for dinner?" "Yeah." "I'd like that." Later, after Kalen left, Callan arrived. He brought homemade soup and warm bread. He didn't knock. He had a key now. They sat by the fire, wrapped in a shared blanket. Talia told him about Kalen, about the mall, about the silent hurt that lingered in the boy's voice. Callan stared into the flames. "I think about Cairo often." She turned to him. "I wonder if I'd known him from the beginning, what kind of father I would have been." "You're here now." "I know, but I carry that question, and I think I always will." Talia rested her head on his shoulder. "Maybe carrying the question is part of staying present." He kissed her forehead. "I don't want to miss what matters." "You're not." That weekend, they took a short trip to Charleston, not for any event, just to walk the streets, try new coffee shops, sit by the harbor. Talia brought her notebook. Callan brought nothing but time. They stayed at a small boutique hotel with exposed brick walls and cotton sheets. On their second night, after hours of walking and soft laughter, they stood on the balcony watching the city lights shimmer. Callan turned to her. "I've been thinking, dangerous." He smiled. "I want to put the lake house in both our names." She blinked. "What?" "You love it there. It's peace for you, and peace matters. If anything happens to me, stop." He paused. "You don't have to give me anything to prove something, Callan. I didn't come back for gifts." "I know. This isn't a gift. It's a decision. If this is the life we're building, then let's build it right. Together." She leaned against him. "Okay, we'll sign together." On their last morning, she woke to sunlight streaking across white sheets. Callan was watching her. "What?" she murmured. "Nothing," he whispered. "Just thinking how far we came." She touched his chest. "I never thought I'd trust again." He pulled her close. "You didn't just trust, you rebuilt." She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she believed it. Back in Atlanta, she got an email from her editor. The first 2 chapters were powerful, raw, honest, marketable. Talia smiled. She wasn't writing for the market, but it helped that her truth could be useful. She printed out the email and taped it beside her desk, a reminder of what she survived, of what she still had to say. One evening, while cooking dinner, Callan walked in with Cairo. They'd come from the library. Cairo held a small stack of books. He waved at Talia. "Hi." "Hey, kiddo. Good day." He nodded. "Dad says we're going to the lake house next month. For your birthday." She grinned. "Who told you?" "He said it's going to be a surprise. But I don't like secrets, so I told you first." Callan groaned. "Well, that's over." Talia laughed. She looked at them, father and son, and felt no ache, no shadow, only gratitude. Later that night, as they cleaned up after dinner, Callan looked at her. "You know, the day you opened that door early changed everything." She stilled. "Because I saw you," he said, "and I saw what I could lose if I didn't stop chasing the wrong things." She turned. "I saw you too, for the first time, past the name, past the story." He took her hands. "We chose each other after the fall, not before." She nodded. "And that's what makes this real." He kissed her, slow and sure. Outside, the city moved. Inside, they stood still, anchored in presence, no longer defined by what had been lost, only by what they chose now, together. Talia stood at the kitchen island, slicing lemons for tea when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, wiped her hands, and answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then a soft breath. "Talia." She knew that voice. Zevrian Holt, the man who once shared her home, her bed, her name. The same man who stood in their penthouse foyer, holding another woman, eyes cold with betrayal. Her body stiffened. "You shouldn't be calling me." "I know," he said quickly. I won't stay long on the line. I heard." "Heard what?" "About your book deal. About you and Callan. About Cairo." She kept quiet. Zev sighed. "I don't want anything, I swear. I didn't expect to feel what I did when I saw that article. The picture of you and Cairo in front of the bookstore. You have no place in this. I know. But I need to say this." She didn't respond. "I was a coward. I lost myself in ambition, in image, in trying to stay ahead. But you were real, and I didn't know how to sit with real." Talia exhaled slowly. "I broke something I can't repair," Zev continued. "I just wanted you to know. I see that now." She let the silence stretch, and finally said, "Thank you for saying it. But this chapter, this life, doesn't belong to you anymore." He swallowed. "I know." Then he hung up. She stared at the lemon slices, still sharp and untouched. That part of her story was finally over. Later that evening, Callan joined her in the garden. He sensed the shift in her energy. "Everything all right?" She told him about the call. The voice, the words. He didn't flinch, didn't tense. "Do you regret anything?" he asked gently. Talia thought. "No. Not even that day I walked in early." "Why not?" "Because it gave me back my voice, and it forced me to finally choose myself." Callan nodded. "Then I'm grateful for it too." She smiled. "Why?" "Because if you hadn't walked away from him, I never would have met the woman who made me slow down and become a man worthy of presence." Her chest tightened, and in that moment she felt more than love. She felt seen. Weeks passed. Talia's book was officially acquired by a major publishing house. Her editor scheduled a fall tour, bookstores in Chicago, New York, Seattle, Austin. She hesitated about leaving Cairo behind. Callan solved it without fanfare. "I'll take paternity leave," he said. "I've been saving it for something that matters. But the company won't collapse. You gave birth to him alone. The least I can do is care for him while you share your truth." She kissed him. At the book tour's final stop in Seattle, a woman approached her with tearful eyes. "I left a man who broke me," she whispered. "Your story gave me courage." Talia hugged her. No cameras, no publicity, just two women. One truth. Pain doesn't win when presence is chosen. Back home, Cairo ran to her at the airport. "Mama!" She scooped him up, inhaled his scent, held him close. Callan was behind him, holding flowers, tired but smiling. "We missed you." "I missed you more." That night, she found a note on her pillow. It read, "We met after life wounded us, but we healed by choosing to stay. Thank you for walking through the fire. I'll meet you there every time." See, she folded the note and placed it in her drawer, next to a photo of Cairo, a dried daffodil from the cabin, and the first page of her manuscript. All pieces of her becoming. Months later, Talia stood at the lake house deck. The sun was setting. Cairo was chasing butterflies near the water. Callan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay," she said. "I'm full." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Let's stay here a few days. No meetings? No phone." She leaned into him. "That night," she said softly, "when I walked in and saw him, I thought my life was ending." He waited, but it was starting. "I just didn't know it yet." Callan's voice was steady. "Sometimes endings are doors. Doors to where? To everything real." They stayed there until the stars came out. And for the first time in a long time, Talia believed that love, when chosen right, wasn't pain, wasn't sacrifice. It was peace. It was showing up. It was home. Have you ever thought the worst moment of your life was the end, only to find out it was the start of something deeper? If this story moved you, take a second and let us know in the comments. Do you know someone who's had to start over after betrayal, heartbreak, or silence? Send this story to them. And don't forget, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more real, raw, and unforgettable storytelling. Because healing is possible, and love, real love, still exists.